Hello all, Gregory Zuniga with Wicked Elf Miniatures here for the virtual paint night. So one thing I've seen growing more and more in the miniature wargaming community is use of weathering pigments, especially in terrain and some of the higher quality models. But what I haven't seen used yet is a lot of weathering pencils. The weathering pencils I'm going to use today are from AK, and we do have one exception. We do have one white chalk pencil, and that can be found in a lot of local hobby shops. I have a concrete barrier from Secret Weapon Miniatures. I'm also going to be using Wolf Gray Reaper Miniatures, and Dark Sepia, which is a wash from Secret Weapon Miniatures. I also need a little bit of water. I'm also going to have a paintbrush. An older paintbrush will do quite well because this is going to get a little messy as a technique. I personally use a wet palette. So the first thing we're going to do is with the Wolf Gray, we're going to put a nice layer of base coat down. The concrete barrier has already been zenith primed. That's going to help to get some better color separation, but we do want to get a layer of color onto it. And I'm not going to be too picky about it. We're just trying to put this on nice and quick. You get some decent coverage, and we're going to take advantage of the fact that it's been zenith primed already. It's going to help us make some color separation for us. Again, not being overly picky. Just trying to get going. We have a lot of texture here, so that's going to be to our advantage later on. And the nice advantage of the weathering pencils are, one, they store very nicely and easily. As you can see, I have a little container for them. Also, if you're not kind of concerned about the pigments getting everywhere or the powdered version of them, this is a good way to do it. Now, they are better for smaller projects or for little areas. If you have a great big project or you're using a larger terrain piece, you're going to want to use the weathering pigments because they're going to have better coverage and get over a larger area easier. It's also much easier to do some pinpoint washes with the weathering pigments, but also if you're traveling, though, these are kind of easier to bring along with you. Again, the nice advantage with the Zenith Prime is I'm not worried about even coverage right now. I'm going to let the Zenith Prime kind of show up a little bit. I'll get some of that detail into and get some of those darker spots as well. So, we're going to do a few drops of the sepia wash. And we're going to thin it down even with a little water. Even though it's a wash, I want it a little thinner. And this is all nice and wet still because it's just been put on. So we're going to just give it a quick run. Gonna have to darken some areas. Try and get in those deeper crevices. Again, I'm not worried about that paint being too clean because, again, we're weathering this, so we're going to make it look pretty dirty over the course of the process. Okay. So we're going to give a quick pause. I'm going to come back once that's all dry and ready to go for our next stage. Okay, now through the magic of editing and a use of a hairdryer, we have a nice, mostly dry piece. So we're going to break into the pencil. So the first color I'm going to grab is Dusted Rain, and mainly just because this is a gray tone I'm looking for. And the nice thing about these pencils are, if they're getting a little bit more rounded, the only major tool you need to actually rebuff them up is a good pencil sharpener. So they sharpen like any other pencil. I can give you more exposure to that color. And we're going to use this pretty much like a dry brush. So all I'm going to do is take that pencil tip, I'm going to use the edge of it, I'm going to kind of scroll over the surface. And this is like dry brushing. I don't actually have to worry about my dry brush though laying too much pigment down. And hopefully the ASMR is good for everyone as well as far as this technique goes. I do like these barriers from Secret Weapon. They are quick, fun paints. And good for some scatter terrain. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to the chalk pencil. I'm going to, again, get the edges. We're just going to use it as a highlighting and make these stones pop out a bit better. I can control a lot of this with the pressure that I'm using. I can also target specific areas like these edges in here. And draw in my lines and get my highlights. Where these holes are at, or even deeper into it. And anywhere where I think the concrete is going to have more of a highlighted edge. Get into it, so I can rub along the edges in here. I can grab this border. Again, not just trying to use just the tip of the brush, or tip of the pencil. I'm trying to use the sides. It's going to be a little easier to get those edges with it. Okie dokie, so hopefully you can see where we have some streaking, some edging of it. A little bit more structuring to everything. Now what we can come down into is now get some more color application. Now, you can actually do washing with writing pencils as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually dip it into a little water and wet the brush. It's going to start loosening up the pigments into it. And then we can just touch it, and it's going to start laying down some color for us. The nice thing about that wet color is now we can come back in with our paintbrush that's damp and push that color around. And keep playing with that application. And don't let the names of the color make you choose one thing over another. You always have a wide variety of options. A rust, if it's dark brown, can be a good mud surface. Or nice colors, we can push that around. And we can come to the other side. And just touch all those different surfaces where we want to get that coloring at. Now, you can also use darker pencils like smoke, or we even have a dark gray in here. But let's go for the smoke. We can actually reach into these darker areas and push some darkness in. We're gonna just tack that down a little bit better. And we can wet that pencil as well. I'll start getting these areas in here. Now that's going to start to dry a little bit. So if I leave it in for a little bit, it's going to create more of a staining effect. So when I come back over with my damp brush, it won't drag the color out as much. We can start picking up some additional detail from everything. This is a nice technique, especially in those more textured surfaces. We can get some color down, and then again with that damp brush, push it around and get some weathering out of it, and get some washes out of it. Again, with that damp brush, I can keep using it as a wash and pushing around to the other surfaces. So I have both good control where I can put it where I want it at, or I can wash it around and pick my locations. This is kind of fun because it makes it very much more like I'm coloring than I'm actually trying to paint something. And for some, that may be just a more comfortable action than we're more used to seeing at times. By painting some dark lines, we can start making some breaks in our concrete where there weren't before, because we're going to register that as a crack. A little bit of texture in here, so we're just going to pick that on up. I can just do a little bit of a drier rub in and start allowing it to kind of put it more powdery. I'm just finding all those different cracks and crevices where I think that color is going to build up at and help make it look better. Other fun thing with these pencils are they are very much mix and match. We can actually start playing with the colors and combining different effects. So I can grab a sepia tone, come back in, and then with the dry applications just start putting in some of those colors. And there's still some water at that's going to start laying it down a little quicker. If I don't like that, I can always just dry the pencil off like I'm doing on my paper towel right here. And go back through and just do a dry application of it. The longer that brush stays wet, though, the more the water is going to start eating away at the binder of the binder of the pencil. And that just gives us some different applications. We can start the staining. If you're ever wondering how some people get some lichen or moss kind of covering, this is a good way to get a good moss. Let's go a little darker color first. Dipping color. Here we go. Go with all green. So on trees or natural objects or things where you can get some growth or bacteria growth or algae growth, we can actually start doing a little bit of this. I'll get this nice color of green in there. And even with that, we can come back in and add a brighter green. And again, with a damp brush, we can drag or tease that out if we want to. And smush around those colors. We can push for higher highlights or darker. Just depending on how you feel you want to go into that portion of things. We can also do some weather staining and some runoff. So I can take the pencil tip and grab just an edge of it. It's going to be a little loose on here, so I'm just going to reinforce it. And draw a line down. I can give me some weather staining. I can make that more extreme by wetting the brush and pulling down. That's going to give it a much more fresher stain. Depending on you see, make sure it's pulling the full surface like it's going to run. And just picture that water running on down. And you have a lot of options for colors, those kind of effects. So we can come back to our dirt And pull some smaller streaks right next to it. Apply around that way. Let's see here. For those that do ships, want some more of that blue staining, this is a great way to actually get those algae bloom staining marks. And we can have the colors interact with each other. So I can do some layers of depth and create some additional depth with things. Since we have those darker colors in, we can come back in and underline these holes and show more light reflection, and it'll help to make those dark spots look even darker with that white line sitting underneath of them. We even create a fading of the whole process down by if we come back over with the chalk pencil and come back over with everything. Right, pick up that texture. We'll get some fading of our colors, and that makes it look more sun exposed. Bring it to one side. Now on the white, be careful though, it will pick up some of the other colors, especially if they're still wet. But this creates the opportunity to add some additional depth, and we can just clean off the white pencil just by turning it over in our towel. And if it ever gets too bad, we can actually just put it through the sharpener and resharpen it, and I'll bring the white back. Let's see here. With the earth tone, I can remove some more streaky marks. Or we can fill in here with some additional color because it's actually going to be fairly dark in here. A lot of texture in that section. I hope you can hear it. That's here. Ooh, we can do something like graffiti. Might be a rough color for the camera. Let me show you switch out the color. Let's try a darker blue. So I'm just going to wet the brush. Wet the pencil. We're just going to do a quick GZ. And once that dries a bit, we can come back in with the gray color. This is actually concrete. I didn't want to cover it all before, but it's a pretty good color. We can come back in and then chip out some of the graffiti color. And I'll make it look like some pieces of it are missing or the paint's been worn away. So we can create some more aging effects that way. What else would be kind of cool is to bring some streaking through it. So that's been sprayed down over some time. And now we can pull some weathering streaks through it to pull some extra layering. We can bring a good sepia tone. green smoke. There is my sepia. Oh, there it is. So with a good sepia tone, we can pull that over a lot of it. And that'll add some good yellowing discoloration to everything. Again, just with a damp brush, we can push that out pretty far. Nice thing about it with wet on wet, you're actually going to see a lot of the colors will start to interact with each other, which will add some more depth to everything. What we do to one side, you do typically want to do to the other side. Just makes it look like it's been in the same environment. Make sure we get the sides as well. Be afraid to wiggle the color a little bit. We don't want straight even lines. That's going to make it look very fake. Back over here, we're just going to darken some of these areas into here. I just want that concrete to look a little more punched out. And once we're out, we can use it to help darken out some colors. I hope that here I'm not really pressing all that hard. I'm letting a lot of the pencil do it and a lot of friction do it as well. And the reason why I don't want to do that is I don't want to scratch the paint on off. So you don't have to press incredibly hard to do these guys. And coming back in with a damp brush. Push all the color around. There we go. So here we have one good dirtied and weathered barrier, and it only took us about 20 minutes of time. The pencils I can keep on pushing or going. I can lighten this up, I can darken this on up. We can come back around this edge and just grab a better darkness to it, and we can fade out the whole thing. The one thing we should talk about the pencils is as this has been more exposed to wetness, the binder compounds are in here, and you can actually gouge out the pencil and pick out a lot of this color. So a lot of times you can actually scoop out the color onto a brush, which is not a bad thing. However, it's really hard to store the pencils like this because they're going to leave some weird shapes to it. So a lot of times after a session, I'll just put the pencils into a cup, not let the tips touch each other. Just kind of spread them out a little bit. And this just lets the pencil's tips just dry and firm up a little bit. And this doesn't take long. Once they're nice and dry, 30 minutes or 40 minutes or so, I can actually put them back into my container to store them. And then go back and pack everything back up and go along that process. So I hope this quick tutorial has been good for everybody. One of the things we will be doing is we're going to be doing a live paint night on Twitch. I will be there to answer any questions for you, and if you have any questions about the weathering pencils, I'll be more than happy to break them out and do an additional demonstration for you guys. Thank you very much for joining the digital paint night, and I hope to see you soon.